Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome into episode 150 of the Canucks Speakeasy podcast. I'm Pete.
I'm Brendan, aka Jabo.
And no Doug this week, which is quite sad because it's 150 episodes, but Doug cannot make it again. He is on the
Apparently
road.
Toronto. Yeah, apparently Toronto is more important than wow.
Yeah, apparently he's got an early flight or something in the morning and yada yada. He can't.
Ooh,
I
okay.
know. I know. Well, episode 150. It's too bad he can't be here. Maybe he can make a cameo or something, but I have a feeling he's probably going to bed. But Brendan, I did get to see you this week. We actually got to watch a game in person, and with that in mind, let's get into the game flight for the week. And that game that we got to watch together, that was the win over the Panthers. The Canucks beat the Panthers 5-3. 3 Canucks with multi-point games in that one. Kuzmenko, Miller, and Pettersson as the Canucks overcame the Panthers coming back from 2 goals down, and Canucks held on to win it 5-3.
And I would argue the Canucks' best game of the season in Nashville. I know some would argue it's the Edmonton game, but I thought overall as a team, the game in Nashville was much better. They win 3-2, only give up 17 shots, really were tidy in front of Demko. And at the end of the third period, with the game on the line, killed a couple of important penalties and something that they hadn't done last year. So it really was a test to get back 4-2 because it's really easy. Last game of a road trip, you're coming home to just kind of mail it in a bit, but they didn't. They played their best game of that road trip and were full marks for coming out with a 3-2 win.
Yeah, it's been rare. Like Doug and I started this podcast, I guess like 4.5 or something years ago. It is rare for us to get a game flight. Now it's only a 2-game flight, but it's rare for us to get a game flight that's all wins. And that means that it should be a fairly positive episode to do this week. We're talking about 2 wins. So I'm excited. And it's a strange feeling looking at the standings and seeing the Canucks 6th overall in the NHL.
And I said, I think I said during last week's show, to me, it was more about process than results. I mean, hey, obviously you're always happy when the results were there, but it was nice to see that the results were based on, better process. They got, they were better in that loss to Tampa, were even better in the game in Florida. I mean, the third period, I thought the first 2 periods, they were actually quite good. And then, got caved in pretty considerably in the game in the third period in Florida. But, then they came to Nashville and played a full 60-minute effort. And, it was nice to see them really give Demko the kind of environment that, you kind of hope that we're going to see, more than what we saw in both Tampa and Philadelphia, where, they were giving up those chances that really plagued them last year. So it was nice to see, because Nashville had come in, one of the teams that were creating as many chances as any team in the league, and to shut them down for the most part. I mean, really, that goal in the second period off of that 3-on-2 basically came out of nowhere, because it wasn't as if Nashville had been carrying the play. I mean, quite the opposite. The Canucks were in Nashville's end for the majority of that second period. It was just one mistake by the forwards that kind of left the defense hung out to dry. There was no support there, and which led to the goal. So, outside of that, I mean, in the third period, they were much better in that third period in Nashville than they were in Florida, where, I don't forget how it was close to 20 shots on goal, if not 20 shots on goal. And that's not going to get it done. So, the process, was progressively getting better, and ended in Nashville, where it was, obviously for me, their most complete performance of the year.
Yeah, I'd say it was pretty complete as well. I mean, heck, there's always a few things that could get cleaned up, and so again, it's not perfect, but we're seeing, like you said, process. We're starting to see things, trending in the right direction a little bit. I mean, this is still, it's very early. It's 6 games in, but remember where we were last year. 6 games in, we were 0-5-1, and the losing wasn't done yet. So this is a far cry from a 0-5-1 start going 4-2. I will agree that, like, okay, obviously the best game was the first one, blowing out Edmonton in the season opener. That was great. But in terms of a complete game, because that game really Edmonton didn't show up. Like they kind of just rolled over and let the Canucks continue to bring wave after wave. There wasn't a lot of fight. There was fight in Nashville from the Predators, and it's again that game and the Florida game. Those are the types of games the Canucks would have lost last year, especially early in the season. We know how they blew leads all the time, and they didn't. They didn't fold. They bent, but they didn't break. You know, I think every Canucks fan saw when Florida tied it up. It's like, oh, here we go. We just blew a 2-goal lead in the third. We're going to fall to 2 and 3. They didn't, and they got the win. And wasn't pretty all the way through, but they got the win. And right now, that is the most important thing. Every team is still in the early stages of the season here, where everyone's a handful, maybe 6-7 games in, whatever. Like everyone's still working out kinks. The Canucks are no exception, but you get as many of these points now in the first 10, first 20. I know everyone always talks about American Thanksgiving as being the first kind of test mark or benchmark, I guess would be the better word for where a team is. Get as many points as you can. It's like in a football game, first half, just take the points. Yeah, if you're 4th and 5 from a 35, kick the field goal. Just, take those points in the first half. And that's really what the Canucks need to do in this stretch up to American Thanksgiving. Just take the points. At the end of this season, 2 points is still 2 points. But again, Nashville and Florida could have easily come away with 0. And last year, I think they would have come away with 0, and they come away with 4. And they finished a road trip 3-2. That road trip that everyone was given the stink eye to at the start of the year when the schedule came out. So for me, this is, yeah, man. I mean, I'm always a glass half full kind of fan, but it feels just kind of nice and a little bit different right now.
Yeah, I mean, probably the best example of what we didn't see last year that we saw at the end of this road trip was, the 2 penalties late in Nashville. You know, uh, for me, when they took those penalties, I'm like, I mean, obviously you're annoyed. And especially the way that game had been called, where nothing had been called. And I'm not saying that they weren't. I mean, the Friedman penalty is probably a penalty. I mean, the Myers one was, I thought, was chintzy. You know, I mean, obviously, there's for whatever reason, there's this point of emphasis on cross checking, but I still thought it was chintzy, especially again considering how the rest of that game had been called, and there was no one. There was, I mean, I think up until that point there was only one penalty, which was the too many men on the ice penalty. So you got to that point, and probably for a lot of fans there was some PTSD. You're seeing your team take late penalties. We know what happened. I mean, I remember there was a game last year early in the season in Boston where the Canucks had the lead late in that game. I think it was a 2-1 game. It's either this year or the year prior, but it was one of the two. And I just remember them giving up 2 power play goals to lose that game 3-2. So over the last couple of years, we've seen that happen. But I was a lot more calm because of what I had seen. And it began in the preseason with the way they kill penalties then. And thankfully it, for the most part, has carried over. I mean, on that, I put out the stat for comparing this year to last year. The Canucks had their 5-game road trip to start the season last year, and they were 10 for 17 on the PK. So you're giving up quite a bit. This year they were 8 for 11. So you spread out those goals. It makes, those are 4 goals. And so if you throw 4 goals into this team in this year, in this season, considering how many games they won by that were close, those goals matter. And it could have cost them a game or two. And so, it really made the difference between coming back 4-2 and, maybe coming back, I don't know, 2-4 or worse. So you got to look at that as a positive. And certainly, like you said, it's 6 games in. So we can't, as guys that are analyzing this, as fans, however you want to call us, you can't go overboard, because a 2-game winning streak could be followed by a 2-game losing streak. So really this team has to be focused on, hey, what we did, hey, pat on the back, it was good, but our aspirations are much bigger than just a 4-2 start to the season. This has to be, this has to carry over to something bigger.
Yeah, and they're also getting goaltending this year, which was something that they didn't get out of the gate last year. I got a question for you, Brendan, but first of all, before I do that, we should get in our plugs. You can for Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I'm still going to call it Twitter. You can follow me at Pete_Gas. The podcast is at Canucks Speak.
I am Jabo, Jabo _Vancouver. And obviously, if you're watching us on YouTube, there's that subscribe button there. So you hit that and never miss a single episode of this show because it's pretty fucking amazing.
Also, Doug is at Doug Venn. And we also have the Canucks Speakeasy outro music playlist that is on Spotify and Apple. Some great beats on there. Okay, my question, anyone watching on YouTube can see that we like to use the virtual backgrounds. It hides the fact that we, both are living in mom's basements or something, I'm sure. But I just like the virtual background. And mine kind of matches my Diwali shirt today.
My place
What's
just
that?
doesn't have anything. I'm kind of like, this is the most plain. Like, people always give me shit because I don't own jerseys and I just don't own. I've never owned a jersey in my life, and
Wow.
I mean, I'm going to the game on Friday. Little father son time with me and my dad, which I'm looking forward to. And I don't think my dad's ever owned a jersey either. So it's just like father, like son. But trust me, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We both scream and yell at the TV.
I'm more of a Canucks t-shirt guy, and as you probably noticed, I got quite a few of these. I wear them more than jerseys. Okay, my question though for you, virtual background. So I got an old school Canucks logo, the skate. You've got Phil DiGiuseppe, who is one of the goal scorers in the game against Nashville. That was another thing about the Nashville game: depth scoring. Mikheyev, DiGiuseppe, and Höglander. Phil DiGiuseppe for me has been a bit of a revelation. Like, I mean, he was used down the stretch last year, and most people, myself included, had him penciled to make the team somewhere in the lineup. Wasn't really quite sure where, but I'm pretty sure I had him more in a bottom six type capacity. This PBJ line, or whatever you want to call it, this has fit Phil DiGiuseppe's game to a T. He's pacing for about a 40-point season right now, playing with Miller and Besser. Whether that's sustainable or not, well, who knows? But what he's doing for that line is kind of the same thing that Mikheyev brings to the Pettersson line. He's causing havoc, going down low, forechecking, and winning puck battles. And we've seen this a few times where the Canucks are running plays where PDG is getting the puck loose to Miller, who's finding Besser. And that's part of the reason why Besser leads the team in scoring. But I want to hear from you. What have you really liked about Phil's game? What's a real standout for you?
I mean, I guess it's probably exemplified probably most well by the winner in Florida. He's the only man in. The rest of his line is changing. And really his goal is to keep the puck down low long enough for reinforcements to get there, and so they can continue that sustained pressure, because for a lot of that period it had been in Vancouver's end. I mean, they obviously given up the 3-1 lead. So I think he understood that this was a shift not long after the tying goal, and the focus had to be on, hey, we need to be on the attack. So not only is he on attack, but he basically wins a 1-on-2 battle for the puck against our old friend OEL, and I don't know who the other Panther player was. And then he gets the puck and a beautiful little pass out in front to Kuzmenko, and obviously good on Kuzmenko, showed really, really tremendous patience in scoring that goal. I mean, it was a really fantastic finish from a guy that clearly knows how to finish. But much in the same vein, obviously maybe not quite to that extent, but much in the same vein is what Burrows brought to the Sedin line. I mean, there's this big belief on Talkett, which I believe was probably the same thing that AV held, that you had duos. And then you find someone that complements that duo, and certainly Burrows obviously complemented what the Sedins did well, in terms of that he needed to be that hard forecheck puck retrieval guy, and you know DiGiuseppe doesn't necessarily have to be that guy to the extent that Burrows had to, because Miller's still fantastic on the forecheck, but being that first guy in as the winger, he really has been fantastic. He gets in there. He knows how to play along the wall. I mean, he's relentless, and he really does play his role to a T. And I've said before that the Canucks need to found gold. Guys that, like, if you want to be a team that becomes a contender, you have to find guys that you didn't expect to play significant roles to do that. Just in the same way that Burrows did. No one expected Burrows, Bieksa, all of those guys that were Hansen, guys that were high draft picks or undrafted free agents in terms of which Burrows was. You have to find that. And I do feel like the Canucks are doing a better job of finding those guys. And I mean, I don't know what DiGiuseppe is going to be long term. I mean, he is 29 years old, and maybe this is just going to be a spurt. But certainly, I mean, it does seem like, he's capable of doing this consistently, which is really that's the key word for Rick Tocchet. It's consistency. And the one thing he knows with DiGiuseppe is he's going to get consistency out of him in terms of the way he competes, the way he goes in forechecks, and the way he plays in his own end. And for a coach, that's exactly what you want.
And the forecheck, I mentioned Mikheyev as well, kind of doing that with the PD line. Mikheyev, I thought, had one of his best games as a Canuck. I really think that last game against Nashville, he was very noticeable, fast in there early. One of the things that Tocchet said either post game or this morning, I think it was maybe post game, was he still didn't like in the third period how the team would kind of sit back a little bit and skate backwards. And he says he wants them to skate forward. And I thought that was really interesting, is he doesn't want guys going backwards. He wants forward and he wants pressure. And I think that's what DiGiuseppe in particular, I think that's how he really kind of got in Tocchet's good books, was that he was doing that already. Mikheyev was signed as a free agent to do that specifically, but this is something that we're going to see more. And he said about half the guys were doing it and half the guys weren't. But every line is going to need that guy who's a crasher, who's going down low. I mean, we've seen Höglander and Joshua both do it a bit as well. And I think for me, that's what PDG really brings to the team, is following what Tocchet is saying in terms of we're not sitting back. You shouldn't be skating forward skating backwards, into your own zone. You need to be attacking. And I like that because, again, this is something that we've seen the Canucks team over the last few years just blow so many leads. And again, you can just feel it coming. And in the game against Florida, they did blow a lead in the third period, but they came back and won in regulation. And then in Nashville, the Preds were coming on, but the Preds could never get it. And Pettersson couldn't hit an empty net. And otherwise it would have been 4-2 and my hockey pool team would have a couple more points there. But they didn't in either case, they didn't actually fold, right? And this is, again, where they're getting it cleaned up. They're attacking, they're playing their game. And even when shit starts to happen, whether the lead gets halved or collapses, or they're getting a bunch of late penalty calls against them, they're bending, but they're not breaking. But for me, those comments from Tocchet about saying how he wants the guys to skate forward, I think that's I think it's going to be very hard right now to get Phil DiGiuseppe off that line, as long as this team is winning and that line is doing what they're doing. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if these top two lines are kind of locked in for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, injuries notwithstanding, which could change things. But I mean, if they're healthy, I mean, yeah, I don't see this changing anytime soon. I mean, you got two balanced scoring lines, and I mean, his Tocchet's thoughts on going forward. I mean, and it was something that the frustrating part of watching that game in Tampa was you felt like there was a lot of that. You felt like there was a lot of backing up and not a lot of going forward. I noticed that. I was watching the game with I believe it was with my brother, and he was saying that it's just like, what the, why are they like, stop backing in, stop backing in. I mean, and it was getting frustrating to watch, and so I can understand what talk it's talking about, and you know, and it's what I've said over the years. I mean, like playing aggressive, and going forward doesn't mean that you're playing out of control, because there's a game management that comes with that. That I feel like, I mean, there were games in the past, in past few seasons where they would attack, but the problem was is that their game management wasn't good, and so they would leave themselves exposed. So if you can combine those two elements where you are attacking, continuing to put pressure, especially in that neutral zone. You don't give them time and space to come at you with speed. Really, really come at them and make sure that their time and space isn't there. Create turnovers. Um, you know, Force them to have to be overly aggressive because you know, I've said it for quite a few years now. Like when you have the lead, you've done your job. You don't have to actively go and be aggressive to try to score. That doesn't mean you're not aggressive. That just means you're not reckless. Which I think there was a tendency for them to do, where they would get three guys down low, they would get too aggressive, and then there'd be an odd man rush the other way. Be aggressive, but be smart in the way you manage the game. And if you do that, if you're constantly pressuring the puck and pressuring the other team, but doing it in a smart way, they will hand you opportunities to score. You will get your odd man rushes. You will get your chances at the other end. You just need to be smart in the way and continue to be aggressive. Continue playing on that front foot and don't back up. Because as soon as you start backing up and backing into your end, it ends up being like the third period in Florida, where it snowballs, and it's very, very difficult when you're defending a lead and you're constantly dealing after wave to get that momentum back. It's very difficult. So I thought, obviously, Florida, there were a lot of issues with that. But I thought in the third period in Nashville, they were much better, a much, much better. Still a work in progress.
Yeah.
Again, we're only 6 games in, and that's the big thing. We're only 6 games in. So for whether it ends up going better or going worse from here on out, things are going to change one way or the other. This team's either going to start really, really getting it and understanding what this coach wants and embracing it and being able to do it consistently, or they won't. Obviously, we're all hoping for the former, but we'll have to wait and see, because there's a lot that's going to change between now and say game 41 that ushers in the middle of the season.
Yeah, you mentioned odd man rushes. That's something I've noticed a bit more myself, as the Canucks are getting a bit more opportunities with that, and that's because they are holding their own blue line a bit better, and they are sending in that forechecker. I mentioned this guy a little while ago, but I wanted to bring up Niels Höglander. Höglander had, I thought, a very strong game again against Nashville after sitting for one. He's played 5 of the 6 Canucks games. He's very quietly put up 4 points in those 5 games as well. He is one of the Canucks. I believe he's tied for 6th on the team in scoring here right now. Yeah, he's tied for 6th on the team in scoring, and he's one of only 5 Canucks who have multiple goals or more. Of course, Besser has 6, but you got Pettersson, Miller, Coos, and Höglander all with 2. I mean, this is encouraging. And again, small sample size, smaller ice time, but he's a guy who I notice as much for getting into those hard areas as I've ever seen. Like, I feel like he's got it a bit more this year. I don't feel like he's a liability. He did get sat that one game, but I felt like he was very strong against the Preds.
He's doing a little more of what he did in his rookie year. And I know I've had some, discussions with others who disagree with me, but I mean, I really thought that first year, he was a lot more straight ahead, a lot more. He was going to the net. I believe his first goal of his career was going to the net. It's his first NHL goal, and I really thought that was what we were going to get. But not unlike a lot of young players who, maybe, and you could argue, I mean, he probably did miss a step in terms of his development. Although I think going down last year, especially when this organization, really gave Abbotsford some clear marching orders as to what they wanted to see from the young players that they were sending down in terms of the way they wanted them to play as 200-foot players. That you got that player back, that, at least to some extent so far. Where he's hard in on the forecheck, he's going to the dirty areas. Obviously, the goal in Nashville, both of his goals, both going to the net, deflections, which is an important skill to learn in this day and age of the NHL where there isn't a lot of room. And going to the net isn't always the easiest or the most fun job that you can have, because you're going up against defensemen that are ready to lay the lumber. But he's doing it more, and he's doing it consistently. And again, there's that word for it. It's consistency. And it's really, if you think about it, it's really the calling card for what we're going to hope to see from this team from here on out, which is, consistency in terms of the way they play, the way they compete for 200 feet. And, as I said in when I was talking about previously, and hopefully really gravitate to the principles that Rick Tocchet wants. Where your coach stands. You also respect that your coach played the game a lot in the way that he's asking his players to play. Rick Tocchet was no nonsense on the ice. He could score goals, he could get assists, and he could kick ass. And he wasn't afraid to go into the corners and do what he had to do to help his team win in it. And he's not asking these players to do anything that he wasn't asking of himself. And so I think I get the feeling the players respect that. And certainly, we're starting to see Hoglander hopefully turn a corner towards more consistency. Because if he plays this way, at some point his ice time's going to go up. Somebody was asking me about his ice time. And I'm just saying, if he does it more consistently, plays that way, his ice time will go up. And he will start being, an even more impactful part of this lineup.
Well, he's averaging 10 minutes and 4 seconds of ice time a game, which is second lowest on the team among guys who've skated. Jack Studnicka is the only one who is averaging less. But so he's doing something with that time out there. You also mentioned consistency. Consistency equals identity as well. If you're playing consistent and you have a style and you're buying into it, that's how you create an identity, and that's how you create a hopefully winning culture. You can have bad identities too, as we've seen in the past. But if you want to get a good culture and play well and build that identity and do it the proper way, consistency is 100% key for that.
Yeah, and much in the way that when, I think I may have brought this up on, previous podcasts, but much in the same way that Vino came in 06 and 07, and he had to decide, which guys he could win with, which players that were going to be able to play the way he wanted to play and do it consistently. And that's how you wind up developing players like a Ryan Kessler, like an Alex Burrows, like a Yannick Hansen, these forwards that would go for 60 minutes and wouldn't stop. And so it's nice when you watch Abbotsford, because that's clearly what they're trying to create. You got guys like Arshdeep Bains, who's having a really good start to the year in Abbotsford. And
sure is.
Obviously, Pod Colson with 5 goals in 5 games. Guys that are going to go to the mat for 60 minutes and not stop. Because if you in the highest league in the world, you stop for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is enough to sink your team. And so you got to get through to these guys that there's no quitting for 60 minutes. And the guys that aren't capable of doing that won't be here.
Yeah, and just going back, Arshdeep Bains as well, tied for the scoring lead in Abbotsford with Christian Wolanin. They both have 8 points in 5 games. Excellent start. Yeah, you mentioned Pod Colson, 6 points in 5 games, 5 of them goals. Niels Amon, 5 points in 5 games, 4 of them goals. He's playing quite well down there. And even Jet Wu has 4 helpers through first 5 games. Linus Carlson is also 4 points in 5 games. So you're starting to see as well down in the farm, and this permeates through the organization. If you have a successful farm team, that means that when guys get injured, you can bring someone up who is already playing the same system, understands their role, comes in, fills that role, and could go back down. And the Canucks have a lot of warm bodies down there in all positions, forwards, defense, and goalie, that can get called up. The Canucks, as we know, have had some terrible runs of injury in the past, but it does feel like there's some good organizational depth down there right now. Also, Andrei Kuzmenko has kind of got going a little bit more. I wanted to just quickly touch on him while we're still on the forwards here. For me, Kuz, kind of a quiet start. I don't think it was the Bali belly or anything like that. I just think really trying to figure out what Talkett's system is and what his role is on the team. But I feel like he's more relaxed the last couple games as well. I feel like just watching him play, he's not gripping the stick quite as tight. Like, I mean, I know Mikheyev, he scored, but he's still gripping the stick a little bit tight. Feels like Kuz is starting to find his rhythm, and that whole line is starting to really get going. Because I got to say right now, we started with the PBJ line. I think that is the team's first line at the moment, but it's pretty awesome having these two lines, having a 2-1 first lines essentially.
It's been a while,
Yeah,
when
it
you
has
could
been a
really
while.
sit there and say that you've got three lines that are constructed the way that they are, where you can sit there and you can look at the three guys on each line, and where they fit in, and what their role is, which, and hat tip to the coaching staff, for building that continuity within those two lines. Yeah, I mean, I think Kuzmenko, you come off of a season where you score 39 goals, and I'm sure no one has more expectations on him than he does. And so, of course, when he struggles to begin the year, or if Talkett's, giving them sort of that tough treatment, which we know we've seen him do last year. It's always low hanging fruit to go, the Bali experiment didn't work, which probably has nothing to do with whatsoever. Because I mean, we know he came back to Vancouver in really good shape. So certainly I don't see that being the issue in any way, shape, or form. I just think, it's the beginning of the year, and really, as much as Talkett, implemented, some of his system last year, there was no way he was going to be able to implement all of it in terms of all of it, of the way he wanted them to play, the system, the structure, those principles that clearly he holds dear as a coach. And so, some players were going to, take some time to figure it out. And clearly Kuzmenko took a couple of games. I think having Mikheyev back does help. Because you've got that real true forechecker on that line, the guy who comes with, I mean, arguably, you could argue is probably the fastest skater in that lineup.
Yeah.
And Mikheyev gets the goal, in Nashville, a little bit of a lucky goal, but hey, you know what? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So
Or you
I
got to
never
be
have
good to be lucky.
exactly right. I have no issues with somebody just putting the puck on net. You never know what's going to happen. And there were a couple of plays, I think they were in the second or third period. I think maybe in the second period, where he on the same shift fanned or flubbed on two shots down
Yeah.
low, where you had it probably if he gets contact.
Hard cross ice passes, both of them.
Yeah. And so, and that's understandable. He hasn't played hockey in 9 months, or he hadn't played hockey, and this is only his second game, it'd be his second game. Yes, because his first game was in Florida. So, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and criticize a guy who hasn't played much. So, those are goals that you hope that he'll score as he gets more and more game time, which I'm assuming he will. And he should only get better. It's just nice to have him back, because he gives the Canucks that element of straight line speed in the top six that, frankly, any team could use more of. So, I'm as that line, the PD line gets more and more gelled together. I'm interested to see where it goes.
Yeah, 2 points in 2 games. Hasn't been used on the penalty kill at all yet. I'm going to be curious to see where that goes. I could see him getting some PK time. He's averaging about 14 minutes a game right now. So I expect that to probably go up as well. Hey, I wanted to, though, I wanted to switch us from the forwards to the defense, because this is something that we always do on this show, is we always talk a lot about the forwards. The defense right now, it's kind of a mixed bag, isn't it? I mean, all of a sudden, this Hughes Hronek pairing is an elite pairing. Like you look at their fancy stats, they are leading the league or in the top handful of defensive pairings in the league in just about every fancy stat category across the board. They look fantastic together. Ian Cole is a shot blocking machine for the Canucks and is kind of doing what you thought he was going to do. After that, though, it's getting a little bit like we're not quite sure after that. Like Susie still is, I think, finding his game a little bit more here. I don't think he's been terrible by any means, but I haven't really had any wow moments, I guess, or anything with him. But he hasn't been terrible. Tyler Myers has not been good. I think everyone in Vancouver knows that, and it's hard to sugarcoat it. And we've seen him demoted to the third pairing. And then you've kind of got that number 6 spot right now, which is at the moment Friedman, who's serviceable, but he's not really, in my opinion, anything more than a depth piece. So that's kind of my scouting report on the blue line right now. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, there's not. I don't know if I have much to add to that. I mean, Hughes and Hronek have been arguably the best pairing in the NHL so far. I mean, I know that probably a lot of people want to say, oh, it's Hughes just playing at an elite level and you could put anybody, but I don't believe that at all. I think Hronek has
No.
been equally as good. I mean, both of those guys have are solid defensively. Again, I'll say this: it helps, when your whole team, because if we saw last game, no matter what pairing was on the ice, the Canucks weren't getting caved in, and when you have all four lines playing 200-foot hockey, it makes a difference, and it really does help your defense. But certainly that pairing doesn't need a ton of help because you've got Hughes, who's, I mean, God, like his skating. I mean, I could sit there and watch him skate for hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful to watch. I mean, there are times where he's in just situations where you're like, ooh, I don't know about that, where it seems compromising, but then he somehow skates out of it. Just to the stick and the puck positioning, when he's got guys on, it's just beautiful to watch. And then you have Hronek, who just makes the right plays. And yeah, he can carry the puck out if he has to, but he has such a good first pass. And always, like, very much in the same vein. And I said this before the season. Somebody asked me who I would compare him to. And I said, I mean, the hope for this team is that he ends up being a Sammy Salo / Matthias Ohlund. Those are the kind of players that you'd want him to be, to play alongside a Quinn Hughes. Guys that are smart, can make a good first pass, are good in their own end,
Big shot.
are physical, big shot. Yeah, I mean, which is a big comparison with Salo. But much like Matthias Ohlund, not afraid to be physical, very good in front of his net, and can clear guys out when he has to do it. So, I mean, that pairing's been just been fantastic. Yeah, and I think Ian Cole's been very, very good. He's exactly what you want out of a number 3-4 defenseman. He's just very good in his own end, and he can make a first pass when he has to, but he's very good at taking sticks, clearing guys out of the front of the net, all the things that the Canucks needed, and probably was part of the reason why it was so much easier to buy out an OEL, was because OEL was not capable of doing that to the extent that Cole was. And so now moving forward, what this team needs to do is find that second 3-4 defenseman
Yeah.
to fit with Cole. Because right now what you've got is a 3-4, or you've got a 1-2, let's just say 1-2-3/4, and then you've got 3-5-6s. And arguably, I mean, maybe Friedman would be better off as a 7. I don't know what Myers is going to give for the rest of the season. I don't know if this is just what he is from now on, or if he's. But I sincerely hope that maybe he, this is just an early season where he's just struggling a bit. He just needs to get, his. For, I guess, lack of a better phrase, his head out of his ass. Because certainly we've seen him play, better than this. And so many of his mistakes are, quite frankly, fixable. for most players, but the question is, are they fixable for him at this point of his career? And then that's the real question. But as I said before the season started, this group here again, this is a season for Tocchet to figure out what he's got, who he can win with, who he can't win with, and really going. And the hope is this team can get into a playoff spot, and then really you can analyze this team with so many players that on expiring contracts that really you then can really build a team for next season that fits what you hope your identity is with the guys that are leaving that you don't think fit.
Yeah, I think it was Yannick Hansen, and I can't remember which hit. I think it might have been on Canucks Central, but as usual, I can't remember anything. But he was talking about Tyler Myers and how, you look at it like Myers got the size. He's well liked. He can move around on the ice. He does have a shot. He's a former Calder Trophy winner, but there's just something right now where he's not using any of those things. He's not using his shot. He does have a goal in the year, but he's not using the shot. He's not using the body. He's just not moving the feet. Like, it's just nothing is working with the guy. And I know we harped on Myers a lot last episode, but for me, with Myers kind of going the wrong way and Soucy not really there yet. Now, again, Soucy hasn't been bad, but he's got another level he needs to get to as well. It's a lot of pressure on the three defensemen, and Hronek played over 27 minutes last night in Nashville. That's a lot, right? And over the season, that adds up. It'd be nice to get him and Hughes down. Hughes always plays big minutes, though. Hronek is ripped, though. The guy is in tremendous shape. I'm sure he could do that all season long, but it's not ideal. And the rumor mill around Ethan Bear is not going to go away. But Ethan Bear is, that's still a ways away if that move actually happens. Now, I do think there's a lot of smoke with Ethan Bear. I think he'd be a pretty good fit on this team, and we've seen him there before. I think he would certainly help. But you're not going to get full up to speed Ethan Bear until well into the new year right now. So I don't know. We talked about Connor Garland before. Nothing really happening there. It's going to be tough to get a defenseman, a right shot defenseman, back from anyone out there right now without being incredibly creative. But for me, that's the only thing right now I think a lot of Canucks fans are looking at is there's still questions with the blue line. Fortunately, the Killer D's, Demko and DeSmith have been playing very well. And it's great having that stability back there. And I think the forwards have been doing their defensive role well. And again, the defense for the most part have been fine. But last night it was the the Myers Soucy pairing that was on for both goals against, and it was pretty noticeable to me. So for me, that's something, it's if Myers keeps up like this, is he going to get benched? Are you going to bring up a guy like Wolanin to play his offside? Is that going to be an improvement for the team? There's a lot of Canucks fans out there who would say yes. I think it might be, but I know Tocchet's not a fan of having lefties on the right side either. So for me, this is just the one thing that and you mentioned all the free agents. There's a real opportunity at the end of this year and at the trade deadline to maybe trade off some guys that you don't feel like you're going to use down the stretch, and maybe you're going to have this cap space with the rising cap, and of course the Canucks have an OEL cap penalty in there as well. But there are going to be some more options. But with D, especially right shot D, it's hard to get them out there via trade or via free agency. The Canucks, I think, did really well to get Filip Hronek. I know some people out there don't like that trade, but I do like that trade. If the Canucks, if this is their only first round pick in that draft, not sure how I'd have felt about it, but they still had it, and they used that pick to take another right D. And Tom Willander has looked very good. You got Hunter B, who's looking really good over with the Kitchener Rangers right now. So there are a couple of prospects, but those guys are still a couple of years away.
Yeah, good on this organization for recognizing that they need right hand D, and went after that. In the draft with two promising guys with Brstavich and Willander. So obviously both of them are a long way to go, and there's no guarantees that, again, like especially with Hunter, I don't want to get ahead of myself because again, he's playing in the OHL, and as we've seen in the past, the step between the OHL and professional hockey is it's a big one. So, and I'm not saying don't be excited because you absolutely should be excited by what you're seeing. What he's doing in the OHL right now is pretty outstanding. Um, I mean, I'll cut like again, like in Myers and Susie obviously played on the low end uh, in Nashville. I mean, you know, obviously Susie's to blame for the first goal. Although, I mean, like again, like I've watched that. I've watched that goal over and over again. I mean, you had like he put the puck to the boards, which is never a bad thing, but there was no support there, and so as much as it was a poor decision on his part. It was. I'm also sitting there wondering where the forward was because that's a big issue that we've seen in the past. No puck support, guys too
Mhm.
high, not there to receive a pass. And really, if I looked at that play, there was really no one set to take a pass from him. So, as much as it was a mistake and he has to own that, I mean, I think there's some blame to go around. And then the other goal, which was more on, I think it was Beauvillier and Suter, I believe, on the other goal. Which I mean, there's really not much you can do if you're two defensemen and you're both back on a 3-on-2, and a guy hits a 98-mile-an-hour slap shot on a nice pass. I mean, at the end of the day, there's not what you can do there either. So I'm not going to sit there. There were other goals, that I can blame Myers on, obviously, but neither of those two goals in Nashville I'm pinning on him. Um, but like again, it's getting that confidence back in him to try and do everything he can just to make the smart, easy plays. Don't make plays that are going to put your team in a bad spot. Um, again, I mean, I don't know how much they can do this year. I mean, obviously, as you said, Ethan Bear might be an option for that right side. Um, again, I think December is what we're looking at for him before he even considers the comeback. And even if he does come back, how much can you expect from a guy that hasn't played in that long?
No, exactly.
That exactly to come in and play in a top four role. That's a lot to ask anybody.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you can expect from him. And we know the trade market is what it is right now. It's not easy to make trades. And I mean, I know a lot of fans want management to be able to snap their fingers and make a deal, but it's not that simple. So it'll be interesting. And again, that's why the process and the structure with which they play with that have all of their forwards playing for 200 feet is that important because you can't let this defense, especially those bottom two pairings, defend on an island constantly like they did in Philadelphia, like they did for parts of the game in Tampa. You can't do that. So as much as on the forwards as it is on the defense.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's been a lot of moments this season where there's still high risk or low percentage passes that the team is making. There's occasional drop pass or no look passes, which always make coaches' blood boil. But I think that as they clean up, you're right, that should help those guys out as well. But geez, for me, it's an area of it's the weak spot, right? Like it'd be nice if you could somehow use Garland. Maybe you're gonna have to take a piece back, which maybe isn't a defenseman, but maybe you get some cap flexibility to bring in Ethan Bear. So there's a little bit of addition by subtraction that way. But again, it's not a lot of market for a winger with making 4.9 million with term. I think Garland's been pretty decent in the lineup for the Canucks, but obviously, once you bring in the agent to help try and facilitate a trade, you kind of know that there's writing on the wall that all parties would like to make a move. And so hopefully we can see something at some point here, and hopefully that can lead towards defenseman improvement. But yeah, you're right as well. That's what I said when I said Ethan Bear. I said it's not likely we're going to really see him until the new year, because even if he is cleared in December and comes back before Christmas, it's going to take time. Like, I mean, we're 6 games into the season here and we're still seeing some rust on some of these guys. And I think that it's going to be,
That was with a training camp, right? That
Yeah,
was what training camp was
and
for.
not only a training camp, but training camp where guys were in camp 2 weeks before it in some cases.
I
Like
mean, I would assume he might go just to ease him in. I would assume they probably send him down to Abbotsford on a
conditioning stint.
conditioning
Yeah.
stint, to ease his way back in, maybe against um, competition that isn't quite at the NHL level. Not bad competition by any stretch of the imagination, but not at the speed and the pace of the NHL, and just allow him to ease his way in a little more than he would. So, I mean, that's of course that's you know taking that leap that they do in fact sign him when he's healthy.
Yeah, it's gonna be definitely a situation to watch, and I know Canucks fans are watching the Garland situation, the Ethan Bear situation. Never any shortage of drama around this team, but hey, at least the drama right now is has got a lot of smiles on Canucks fans. Brandon, let's take this into the free pour here. All right, folks, it's that time of the episode for the free pour open floor. And I'm going to go first. And being, 6 days out until Halloween, I just wanted to talk about something that I've kind of noticed is being an Islander, being from Victoria and growing up in Victoria. We always did neighborhood bonfires. Kids would trick or treat together. The families, the parents would all pitch in money, and we'd shoot off a big fireworks display every night. There were fireworks all over Victoria. I've noticed over here in Vancouver, the mentality with fireworks, it's much less positive. There's a lot of people here who don't like the fireworks. I'm not quite sure what it is, if it's because the noise, it keeps people up. I understand how it scares dogs and totally get that. I'm more concerned about what it does to dogs and what it does to people because dogs are the best. But I've noticed over here that there's this real like, are you team firework or team not firework? And growing up in Vic, it was never like that. It was just fireworks everywhere. That like kind of one night of the year where there's just fireworks all over the place in Victoria. So I don't know. I'd just be curious to hear thoughts from anyone out there about the fireworks, if this is an Islander Victoria thing versus a more of a mainland Vancouver thing. I don't know, but just something I was thinking as we get close, and I've started hearing a few pew pews from the fireworks going off around Vancouver in the last little while. Brendan, what do you got? Oh, I see Brandon setting up his screen. Oh, I see he's
Yeah,
setting up his
let's
screen
go.
here. All right, what we
Let's
got
go.
today?
Ah,
Ooh,
we have the final of the Rugby World Cup, and for anybody who knows World Rugby, it's a clash of the two. I don't think. I mean, Australia's thrown in there as well, but I would say the two most decorated countries in world rugby, that being the Springboks of South Africa and the All Blacks of New Zealand. Um, I mean, it should be a fantastic final. These two, there's so much tradition between these two teams. I mean, if France was, because it's being hosted in France, so I mean, if you weren't going to have the host country in there, I think these are the two countries that you'd want to see, just to see how this goes, because I believe this is the first time that these two teams have squared off since that famous Rugby World Cup final in 1995, the one that took place in South Africa. For those people that have seen the movie Invictus with Matt Damon, that movie's based off the 1995 Rugby World Cup that South Africa ended up winning in. It was probably one of the most famous games in the history of world rugby. So I'm excited for this final. I'm going to watch it. It's this weekend. So I'm a Springbok fan when I'm not cheering for Canada. Canada wasn't in this Rugby World Cup, so I cheered for South Africa. I'll be cheering for South Africa in the final, and so I'm excited to watch.
thanks for tuning in, folks. Episode 150. How about that? That's season 5, episode 4, just about in the books. Brendan,
It
you
felt like
mentioned
it flew by for me, man.
it really, yeah. I mean, it felt like that 150
Woo!
episodes is only like 3 or
Ah,
4, right?
where has
But
the
you
time
did it.
gone?
I don't know, man. You did it. Who would? It's all COVID. Time's in a blender. You had mentioned the Rugby World Cup in your free pour. It's just a great time of year for sports right now, man. The World Series is starting up this week. The NBA started up. NFL's in full swing. Premier League, Champions League is going on. There is so much happening right now. It's just a great time of year to be a sports fan.
Just I should say, as we leave, the baby Canucks are in action tonight, up and not that this is going to matter when most people listen, but they're winning 2-1 right now. McDonough with a
Nice.
goal, Arshdeep Baines with a goal, Podkolzin with an assist. So, it's
Beauty.
yeah,
And
starting
also,
2-1 baby Canucks. I know some people hate when I call them baby Canucks, but
we should also give a shout out to Jonathan Lekaramaki as well in the Canucks prospects system here. It sounds like he'll be on the World Junior team and on pace to break some Swedish scoring records at the moment. He's got 7 goals already over in the SHL.
fingers crossed,
Pacing,
very early. Fingers
yeah,
crossed.
very, very early, but he's pacing to break Kent Nielsen's record of goals for an under 20 in a season. Something to keep an eye on, but it's great to see him bounce back after last year as well. Folks, if you aren't following us on Twitter, you maybe should. We sometimes say things. I'm at Pete_Gas. Doug, who's not on the episode today, is at Doug Vin. The podcast is at Canucks Speak. Brendan, yourself?
Jabo, JABO_Vancouver. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, that subscribe button's right there. There's no excuse not to hit it. Big weekend coming up for the Canucks. A rare back-to-back. Blues, then Rangers. I mean, this 3-game homestand. You want to hope that they can follow up what was a good end of that road trip with a good 3-game homestand. They go back on the road for one in San Jose, then back for a couple of more before they hit their Eastern road trip going in and around November Remembrance Day. So let's hope they can continue building on what they built at the end of that road trip.
Yeah, no off nights. That's what we want to see. Also, yeah, give us likes or subscribes on YouTube. That helps us out a lot. Really appreciate it. And if you also want to hear where all this music goes, Canucks Speakeasy outro music playlists. Those are on both Spotify and Apple, and we'll be adding this track onto there. Until next time, folks, we got 3 games until the next episode. Let's see where we go. Hasta luego.